So I'll be talking about extraction part of live theory that Sahil just talked about, and more specifically, a product that I worked on or an interface called the live conversational threads. So extraction. So what does extraction mean to me? Is normally when we talk about formalisms, our main focus is to create like decontextualize or basically exclude a few parts to find a common part, as you can see here, to generalize a concept. So, and in live theory, the idea is somewhat different from that. So you have a lot of abstract concepts similar to deception and other things that Sahil just mentioned. So that concept might be difficult to explain using a single formalism. So it becomes important that you have a pluralism of formalism that can represent different parts of deception that may be relevant to different fields. So for example, someone interested in mech-intip might be interested in this part of deception, whereas someone interested in something else might be interested in deception in a different way. And the same thing goes around. So that is the idea of that makes it important to have like this concept of extraction. So I have this thing written here called extrapolation of theory.
Are you taking questions in the middle or no?
I can take questions now. I think I'd prefer if we have it at the end, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So I have written something called the extrapolation of theoreticians over here. So what does that mean? So you have these things that are marked, right? So there are multiple formalisms. Now, you need to assign a bunch of people to work on generating those formalisms. Now, imagine if those mathematicians or theoreticians could work at a very cheap rate and could do things really fast. Then they could create this multiple formalism at like in an instant. So that's what we're trying to do here. So coming to live conversational threads. So this is a tool specifically like created for researchers and AI alignment people who are working on it. And the idea is something like this. So you have a transcript, you break it down into conversational threads, which are independent conversations that were part of this huge conversation, but also make sense independently. And then you have something called the contextual flow of conversation. So normally when you're trying to browse a conversation, you go through the transcript, you're reading it as it is. But it also becomes important, like this makes it way easier to browse the conversation. So you're like, this is like a new way of browsing a conversation. So if you're interested along this direction, like how the conversation went, like if someone talked about some topic in the beginning and towards the end, it would still be connected. So that's like you're connecting conversations contextually rather than just the way they went. So like even if you go on multiple tangents, you can still track how the particular topic in a conversation went. So that's what we're trying to do with this particular tool. So I want to talk about progress, or like a contextual progress that we're trying to mark. So the user can mark different things, like they can assign tags to these conversational threads using like wishes, or like just saying, oh, capture this particular thing. So I have something called contextual progress. So I want to build on top of what Sahil was talking about, that is post-rigour by Terry Tao. So this concept, like he talked about deception being be converted into multiple different formalisms. It seems like that intuition that comes is very similar to what happens in sports. Like for example, this example over here where Steph Curry is scoring a 3-pointer. Before the ball is gone and he has already gotten the feel or the smell that it's going to go in. So that's why he's already celebrating even before it went in. So that comes like that's an intuition or an instinct that has come inside him, like after practicing for so many years. The same thing goes for math as well. Once you start doing, like imagine you solved a whole bunch of algebraic problems, even though you're not referring to any problem previously, you kind of have an idea of what you want to do. So that's something that I'm talking about. So how do we extract formalisms from whatever this contextual progress that we're talking about? So this contextual progress can be thought of as a potential insight, like I mentioned, that like a person is having a conversation and they just say, oh, I see that this could be potentially an insight, or it could be something meaningful. And he kind of directs the AI to look at this particular part of the conversation. And the user, or rather the person trying to extract this formalism, kind of mentions, oh, these are my research interests. I'm interested in mech interp. Oh, I'm interested in evals or something else. And what actually happens is there is this AI-enabled autostructure that happens, which generates this pluralism of formalisms that we're talking about. So you have like a mech interp, like this insights that we get from a conversation of deception. It kind of gets generated, like the formalisms from this insight gets generated in a way that it's useful to the mech interp person. So let's look at this in action. So this is the interface that I've built. So what it does is it takes a conversation. So for example, this is a conversation that's being had between two friends. And what it does is it generates a graph. Like you have two sorts of graph. I have a pre-generated one, so I'm going to look at that now. So you have something called a structural flow of the conversation, which kind of shows you how exactly the conversation went, like one by one by one by one. And you have something called a contextual flow of the conversation, which I was talking about. So over here, you can see that this is a conversation, actual conversation from one of Sahil's, like the meeting that we had with Sahil. So I can like click on one of the nodes or the conversational threads, and it gives you a summary of what is talked about. So this is the basketball analogy that I was talking about, and it shows you where did it draw a context from, like how is it related to this other node that has been marked. So for example, it says that I build on top of aesthetic discernment that Sahil was talking about, and similarly the same thing goes on for the other things as well. It kind of shows you, rather than having some other way of connecting things, you're rather connecting them contextually, and it makes sense to do this. And it makes it also easier to browse. I'd like to show an example. So this is one of the participants who initially mentioned something and we stopped talking about it. And later when we started talking about it, it connects it to there. So like if you're browsing that particular conversation, like conversational flow, contextual flow, after that node, you would come directly here and you could browse that over here and you can see where and all it's drawing context from. And this similar thing goes next. You can see where else other things are drawing context from. So, okay, all right, that's cool. So you were talking about extraction of formalism. So how are you going to do that? So this is the one that we just produced. So there are two formalisms. So I'm going to consider this itself. So you have something called cognitive bias, and you have like productivity and things like that. So I would say a person browsing this conversation might be interested in something like, I'm interested in studies about human biases, and they could generate a formalism. It takes a little while because the idea is that the infrastructure will catch up soon. But yeah, you can see that two different formalisms have been produced, and you can look at them by clicking here. So this is not absolutely perfect or whatever, but you can see that the causal loop diagram has been generated, or the formalism has been generated. Similarly, you can produce it for the other thing as well. So yeah, that's the interface. If anyone has any questions for the presentation or the interface, please go ahead. Yes, Bishwa.